SMU quarterback Preston Stone is taking over as the starter this season. Tanner Mordecai is gone. Whiskey Pony asks, how many yards do you think Preston Stone throws and runs for this year if he stays healthy? And a follow-up question to that, and we'll kind of break this all down. PonyFan81 asked, last year about this time, you seemed pretty bearish on Preston's potential. Now he's the guy. Do you still have concerns, or did something change your view on his current abilities and potential over the next few years? I feel like when you look at Preston Stone and what he could do this season, SMU had Tanner Mordecai last year, threw for 3,500 yards. He missed some time. The quarterbacks for SMU combined for over 4,000 yards passing last year. And the run game with them really wasn't anything to write home about. Obviously, Tanner Mordecai didn't run the ball enough when he had opportunities to. He had 100 yards. Preston Stone had 63 yards on 14 carries. He played in 6 games. Kevin Jennings, 5 carries, 8 yards. He didn't really do too much running the football. Just overall, they were trying to be careful with him whenever he was in the game because that was it at quarterback for SMU. For Preston Stone, I think it's reasonable. If SMU is going to be successful this year, they need Preston Stone to have a similar season throwing the football to what Tanner Mordecai had. Where he has to continue to work on is taking care of the football, improving that aspect that Tanner Mordecai, had moments where he, quite honestly, just made some really ill-advised throws that cost SMU in a big way. Tanner threw for over 3,500 yards. He completed 65% of his passes, 33 touchdowns, 10 picks. I think Preston Stone needs to be in that 3,500 range, just a little bit above it. He needs to be about 35 touchdowns. And for SMU to be successful this year and win the AAC, I really think he needs to be about 7 to 10 on interceptions if he's healthy the whole year. So maybe you have some games where it doesn't go as well as you think, but he has to stay under 10, I would think, on the interception front. And then running the football, I think if he adds about 400 yards on the ground, that would be a pretty good deal for SMU's offense. And look, they have a really impressive, running back stable on paper. So I'm interested to see just kind of overall how all that works out. But when it comes to Preston Stone overall, my expectations for him, some of the pieces of that is I think Preston is not like a Kevin Henry Jennings, who is still continuing to get kind of polished and kind of ready to eventually take over and be a starting guy. Tanner Mordecai was pretty polished coming out of high school. He just sat a ton at OU and then obviously transferred to SMU and was successful. But Preston Stone is older for his class. He's always been physically developed. I think he's in the best shape of his life. It looks like he's trimmed down a little bit since his freshman year. Lost either some baby fat or just some mass, maybe that they tried to pack on him. And now with Preston, I think the biggest thing is, first of all, staying healthy. Got to be able to do that. But when I watch him at certain points of this spring, we saw him shy away at times from throwing the deep ball with conviction. And he came back and really had a strong last couple of weeks of the spring doing that. And I want to continue to see that. His arm strength is kind of what had me at times a little bearish on him. And what I mean by that is Preston can make every throw, but it is not, I think, on the level of a Shane Buechele, Tanner Mordecai, as far as pure arm strength that we've seen. He has a tendency at times to underthrow a deep ball, which allows receivers to come back to it and make plays. And SMU has the talent at the receiver position to allow him to do that. But on the flip side, they've got to have him be a little bit better on his timing. I think the timing with those receivers, and over the course of this summer, with him being the guy now, the idea would be that he can improve that and he can make that happen. And, for SMU to be successful this year, that's what's got to happen. So I'm high on Preston Stone. I think from a standpoint of where he's at in his career, and this is going to sound a little weird, he's pretty much a finished product. So I think there is going to be game experience that comes and helps him understand situations and improve in decision making, and that can help him long term in his career. But as far as who he is and his kind of style, he's polished. He's done in that sense. So Preston Stone has been around now for 2 seasons at SMU now. And I get the sense that, one, he has to be ready to go game one. There can't be a learning curve. He's played enough football in competitive games now that he cannot be what SMU is waiting on to click. They have too much talent. They have too high of expectations. And look, you get Louisiana Tech, who's going to have a new coaching staff. It's going to be very different. But then you get into Oklahoma, and you obviously get a throwaway game against Grand Prairie A&M before TCU. But you've got to be ready to go game one. And he's old enough as a person in general, and then also have played enough competitive games and situations that he's got to be ready to go. And I think his style and everything he's been preparing for makes him somewhat of a finished product. So I think his floor is very high, but I don't necessarily see, like, if we're sitting here end of 2024 season, okay, I don't think we're going to be sitting here saying, oh my gosh, have you got the jump from Preston Stone's first year as a starter to second was so insane that he elevated his game to a completely different level. I just don't, I don't see that happening. What I can see happening is him having a very good year and that allowing SMU to win the AAC and have a successful season. I just think because he's older, because he's been polished for years, I think he's got a high floor. He's not a necessarily like a high ceiling type of quarterback. Like, I think, for example, like Keldrick Luster, Kevin Jennings, those guys might be a little bit higher ceiling, but they still have a lot of development to go, and both are still very young. But Preston's been so polished and he's played so much football that I just think he's a little bit closer to a finished product for the most part. So a lot of talent around him. Expectations are really high for Preston Stone. He's got to be ready to go. Game one against Louisiana Tech, 11 a.m. And in Ford Stadium, and be ready to put on a show. This has been a long time coming for him. There's a lot of excitement, as there should be, around Preston Stone, but he's going to be the reason why SMU either wins the AAC and finally gets over that hump of having the type of season a lot of people think SMU can have, or there's a real chance that he's, he would be the thing that a lot of people would point to and say it just wasn't good enough. But that's part of playing quarterback. All the expectations fall on you, and you've got to shoulder them. And good thing for Preston Stone, he's been through a lot of situations over the course of his career between high school and college, and he really has a good head on his shoulder to handle it all. I mean, he's a pro in all aspects: preparation, demeanor, how he handles his teammates. So I have high expectations. I think he's going to have the potential to really lead SMU to the AAC this year and win it. So expectations couldn't be higher in a sense for SMU this year. And because of that, Preston Stone.